All right, so let's get to the elephant in the room, shall we?
The flaming elephant.
Yes, IFT-7. Oh boy,
Yeah,
that was quite something, wasn't it?
people were very dramatic about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we knew that this could happen at some point, and with a new ship version, it was, more likely than not. A lot of people doomering over it, and it's like, oh, this is going to set back the program so much.
At least we were entertained.
We were entertained. It was a beautiful light show.
Yes, it was.
Okay,
the one thing is like the liftoff. They just have it down, so you can be very confident that it's going to work. I mean, you can see it jump off the pad. Again, I think I get like 1.5 was the thrust to weight ratio coming out of there, which is why it jumps off so well. So all that, concern about liftoff and hot staging, I mean, that's behind us. And clearly, some upgrades, something was wrong with Starship, and we could see something very early on that we're going to see like an instant here when they switch to these cameras that are on board the Starship. So you can already begin to see something failing on the skin. And the question is whether that's critical or not. So if you pause it for a second, just a second, you're not going to see it yet, but on the left side, there's a little hole that you can barely see. There's a little black hole. And then as it gets up high enough,
I think you can already see a bit of it.
You can start to see peeling back right there, right where that cursor
right there. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can, at that point, that hole was there instantly as soon as they went up there. So something either fell off or burst off, and then it gets peeled back as you start getting closer and closer to max Q. Now you understand what max Q is all about.
Mind you. Just to clarify, this is on the Starship.
Starship, not the booster. Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what we're looking at here. So these aren't tiles. And it doesn't look like the metal skin. It seems like it's the ablative layer under the tiles that maybe they like the secondary TPS.
So is that right? Video.
Well, no,
I
no.
was watching a Scott Manley video, and he said it was sort of a bumper to do with that they wanted to test out as an extra layer. I'm not sure.
It's hard to say because that's the leeward side. So the TPS is underneath. The white part that you're seeing there, I think that's the frost line, and then what we're seeing is the interstage. I've been trying to figure out exactly where it is, but I believe that's between the locks in the methane.
Okay,
so you're actually seeing the outer skin, and now you're seeing it peel back quite a bit.
Hold on though. I think if you look at that skin, you're going to see you see all those little dots. Are those not the pins for tiles that they left off? Because doesn't the TPS near the nose of the ship go all the way over the?
But I don't think this is at the nose. I think this is about halfway down. I was trying to figure out exactly the location of that, and it seems to be it's down a ways, and it might be between the two tanks, which is why we're seeing.
Wait, if it's between the two tanks, then we should the frost line should be complete because it's common dome.
Okay, okay. So there's a frost.
I think that's near the nose. I think that's the view from the forward flap.
It throws us off.
It's fisheye, and we're seeing the
the
back side of the flap. I mean,
I've been trying to go through, and I'm pretty sure it's not TPS. And in that part there, I don't think it is. It does look like the sheet metal is starting to get ripped off there, and something else happened. Now, it doesn't mean that this was the cause. This could be the effect. So there was something about overpressure or venting. So you never know whatever happened. But I think that's down the lower end of Starship, right?
Okay, so if it's pressurized, what we're talking about is like less than 1 bar.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's a nose cone, then they pressurize it a little bit or leave it pressurized for ascent for structural rigidity. I don't think the skin is peeling off there.
Let me just get in, Scott. Let me get your tweet on so you can get a better view. Let me blow it up a bit. Okay, so this is it. You have it circled in red here, and this. Not sure.
That's like the little spot that we're seeing, and then the tear that comes after that. So it seems like there's something off camera we're not seeing that may have already come loose. And then because it was loose, it then allowed the stream to get in there and start to peel it back. So there was an event
explain this to me. I see a kind of a rectangular section Is that an addition?
It looks like it's a patch that's going over something. Like it's almost looks like it's a cover or something protecting something below it. Not quite sure what that is. And again, it could be that there's nothing important underneath it. But my assumption is that it could have been a cover for something that they were running along the outside. And maybe something happened underneath to cause a little bit of a rupture there. That could be connected to all the other issues. Or it could just be a nothing burger.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out if they tell us about it.
Yeah, and it's going to be a part of the investigation. There is definitely going to be an FAA investigation because it did have an anomaly and everything else. They have to go through and check it out. And that's one thing that they're going to look at. There's no doubt about it. They're going to look at it. And they may say, oh, it's minor, it's absolutely nothing. But next time, make sure it doesn't peel off.
And this is what Elon had to say, of course, that they had an oxygen fuel leak in the cavity above the ship engine firewall that was large enough to build pressure in excess of the vent capacity. Does this make sense to you?
So the ship engine firewall is the thing that's protecting the most of the machinery of the engines from the fire that's happening below. I think it's probably more for protecting for hot staging and reentry. So you got the nozzles, and then you've basically got a layer of metal and then covers over the engines as well. So it would be in that space, like inside the skirt behind the upwards from the nozzles. It makes sense. That's where all the plumbing is, right? That's where
it would be down at this lower end here, I think.
Yeah.
So it's somewhere down here where you've got the engines there. So somewhere in around there, where we're seeing it peel off is way up here. So they're in different ends of the vehicle.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Right.
What would we do without your props, Scott?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so just like if that is the problem, then obviously what Elon said is we're going to be more careful checking for leaks in that area, and we're going to increase the firefighting capability in that area. But I'll also add that Raptor 3 should help with this as well, because that Raptor 3 should be getting rid of the ship engine firewall once it ends up on the ship. I think they're going to start with the booster first, but once they have it on the ship, with all of its really well contained and encapsulated plumbing, it doesn't need that protection anymore. So then you're less likely to have this small volume where you can have gases build up.
Okay, so let's kind of play through this video now and look at that beautiful, gorgeous catch. That was quite something, yeah. So before that, is there anything else that you guys noticed on the way up? It seemed pretty much copybook for me.
Hot staging and everything really went well.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it.
Staging was a lot lower, obviously, and
yeah, and the visibility was brilliant because you could literally see the ring that came down under the booster.
Yes.
On the way down.
Yes, it was really the only thing
that made it scary, to be honest.
Yeah, the only thing that made it hard to track the booster on the way down is when it actually went through its own condensation cloud. So that was the only cloud in the sky was what was man-made, and there was a moment there where you couldn't track the vehicle anymore as it burst through. But clearly, the landing, the first landing definitely looked like they were lucky. It was kind of coming down.
Yeah.
It was belching flames and stuff like that, and then it somehow gets caught, and then it starts belching a bunch more flames. You're just not sure what's going on, and I think they pretty much said, they were really kind of lucky to get it, because obviously the second time they had to abort because of some minor glitch. This one looked like they had practiced this 100 times. It came in so smoothly. The booster looked so clean, and the grab attempt, everything went well, and then the engine shut down. There was like very little venting. I mean, there was just nothing. Compared to the other. So if
no lingering fires.
Yes, I think Tesla Silicon Valley owners, John put out a post showing both of them side by side coming on down, and you can see the difference. You can see, wow, what a difference 4 months makes.
Yeah.
And also the scalding on the outside of the bottom of the booster was a lot less this time.
Yes, it was much cleaner, much cleaner.
It was just so safe to say they've got the booster catch all sorted out.
Yes, but one issue here is that a little bit of concern that in the boost back, one engine went out.
All right.
Now, I'm gonna say I'm concerned, and then I'm going to contradict myself and tell you why I'm not concerned. So it went out, which meant, oh my God, there must have been a rut or this or that or something else. More than likely, it's because something happened and it said, oh, okay, we're not starting up. We're out of parameter. We're not doing it. However, it then lit up without any problem for the landing burn. So that's why I say I'm not concerned, because it wasn't a hardware failure.
You needed a reboot.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like that. It's like some, just that one engine. It was like, oh no, we don't like what we're seeing. The pressure's not right. Don't risk it. Yeah. But that's the whole idea of having so many engines, is you've got redundancy. So they still were able to get it right into where they needed to be. And then they all lit up. And then you saw that landing. I mean, that was like about as perfect a catch as that you were going to see.
And look at these views. I mean, was it just me, or was the transmission like crystal?
Oh, it's getting better and better. Yeah. They said they were putting more dishes on there, which is why the second I saw something like problems with the Starlink cams, I'm like, uh-oh, there shouldn't be any problems with the Star cams right now. That's when you kind of was like, I think they lost the booster. or they lost the ship. The ship. Yeah.
Yeah, I was so distracted by the booster, I didn't even notice the engines going out. They went out one by one, and frankly, I mean, I'm kind of surprised that they. I mean, I get that it's a test flight and they want to see how far it goes, but I think in a situation like this, if you have fire in the aft end, you should be able to know that right away. Yeah. Right? You should have sensors in there to tell you, okay, it's too hot. We got gases that we shouldn't have here, pressure we shouldn't have here, and then. What I would expect if you have passengers on board something like this, you can't just blow it up and let it fall into the ocean. What I would expect to have happened in the long term.
Hold on, time out. This is my question. I want to know: was it a RUD, or was the FTS triggered?
We don't know.
I think it was.
Which is scary.
What I think is it might have been both, because we see the engine shutting down. And so one of the engines may have rutted, but I don't think it necessarily caused the ship to explode.
Yeah.
It could have been that because as it shuts down one by one, you begin to see that, its speed and everything is not where it's supposed to be. It's off nominal. And as soon as that happens, that's usually a reason to trigger the FTS. Now, there's been some discussion of like, well, at that point, the FTS would have been saved. My understanding, it's not safe until SECO. Is that correct?
I don't know. I thought it was safe before that. So once, I've heard that it would have been saved. I don't know. I mean, it seems like if FTS had failed to trigger, they would have told us. Mm-hmm. I think it makes sense for it not to trigger, because if you trigger it on its way up, then you're going to have a wider debris field. Right. Than if it blows up coming down.
And the reason I
or you blow it up on coming down
is because let's look at this post from Amy, and if you look at the flight path and the safe area, and I think I saw a map which had the planes circling in a holding pattern just outside that safe zone, the danger zone, the red zone. Now if let's go back to what you were saying. If they triggered FTS on the way up, then what would that do to that red zone? And what would it mean for aircraft that were in a holding pattern around it just outside?
So if you blow it up, the pieces start dispersing, right? And the longer they have to disperse, the farther they will go, and the wider the field will land. It will be when they finally land. The longer you wait, the less time you give the pieces to scatter. So the narrower your debris field. So it would if the plan was not to trigger it in the event of an anomaly like this as soon as possible, then changing it to be like that would increase the width of the red zone.
Yeah. So there's a difference between it exploding and breaking apart. So if it just broke apart and you didn't get an explosion, that means everything is going to still be around the same center of mass, very close together. But if you do the explosion, then suddenly it's just going off in every single direction, and then you do get the bigger debris field. I think it's one of those things that's tough to call. Do you blow it or not? We don't know whether. I mean, clearly there was an explosion because someone on Disney Cruise, they were aware that Starship is coming, and they were tracking it the whole time, and they were shocked, and you just saw what was a pretty big explosion.
And you can just you could have that just from the tank pressure coming in hot, on a steep trajectory, and then at an angle that was out of control. So.
Yeah, and of course the whole idea of the FDS sometimes is to cause an explosion. So you may have had enough oxygen and methane at the point. Of course, the other reason to wait as long as possible is that if they did it too early, you would have had more fuel to combust. Yeah. If you have less, then you might have a smaller explosion.
Yeah. So more fuel equals a greater area that the debris is dispersed also.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm gonna have to go. But
okay, cool. Great to have you back.
I look forward to seeing what
and we're going to do this again, hopefully live next time. So
that'll be great.
Fingers crossed. Let's see. All right. Thanks, Ozan.
Talk to you later.
Thank you, Ozan. Yeah, bye-bye.
All right. Now that is a sight to behold.
Yeah, it's incredible. And everything is so smooth. The confidence of the positioning of the engines, they're not like wiggling all over the place trying to figure out how to. It's just like they know exactly what they have to do. A little bit this way, a little bit that way. And that little belch at the end was very small compared to the previous catch when there was there's quite a bit coming out. So it was
the first time I was a bit scared because those flames refused to go out, and I was like, "Oops, are we going to have?"
Yes, and you can tell if you look at the two next side by side, this one looks really clean. There's no scorch marks on it whatsoever. The other thing will be interesting to find out is you could see how hot it was coming down. All around the engines was like really, really hot. And there was a concern that I think the first time that they were getting a bit too hot there, and they were going to do something to mitigate that. I don't know what the mitigation strategy was. I thought, the mitigation, might be that you have like a reentry burn, but they didn't have a reentry burn. So they did something else to help, keep everything cool. So they were always within limits. But that was a beautiful catch. No doubt about it. I think it gives everyone way more confidence on what you can do with the booster now. It's like you're a little bit shaky about what happened with Starship, but that's, again, they made a lot of changes to this one.
It looked as if they were being terribly ambitious with Starship.
And pretty quick. I mean, I was, the last couple of times everyone wanted to know when they were going to launch. I think I was the one that was kind of closer to the launches because everyone's like enthusiastic. Oh, they're going to launch in 6 weeks. I'm like, they get a lot of things to go through here. It's going to take a little bit longer. And so, after the last launch, I think within a week or two, I already heard from Felix Schlange. He was already announcing on his channel that looked like January 11th. I'm like, January? I mean, that is like really, I can't believe it's that soon. And, especially with the holidays and everything else that's kind of coming on. And then, sure enough, we started hearing that they not only targeting January 11th, they ended up targeting the 10th. So that wasn't an internal one, and they missed that target for a couple reasons. The main reason was the weather was uncooperative. And there may have been like one or two things that they had to kind of get ready, but they got that. So it shows that they're moving very, very fast. And the question is like, was that too fast that something kind of slipped through? Because remember, they've already got another one ready and another one after that.
That's a philosophy, right?
But at the same time, if these things are coming up if they're coming off the production line really quickly, it may be that someone is working a bit too hard. So you don't quite have the luxury of time to make sure everything's all right. But that's okay. They'll probably figure out what the issue is and resolve it. And it's usually it's like, don't worry about it. It's already fixed in the next version. We've already made some changes that we know we're going to take care of that. So it's not an issue.
Okay. So explain this to me, because is this the end of the boost pack burn, or why is it glowing red?
Because it's because basically that's the heat shield. that is so you're coming in very, very hot, and they've done absolutely nothing to slow the vehicle down. The Falcon 9, it's made out of type of aluminum alloy, but we all imagine that aluminum probably melts pretty early. compared to some other metals like titanium. And so when the Falcon 9's coming in, as they start to get into the upper atmosphere, and as the stresses get to be a bit too much and the heating starts to get beyond where they want it to be, they do a reentry burn, which slows it down. So if you slow it down enough, then it's not going to be that bad. They've decided on this that they are not going to do the reentry burn. It's just coming in. They are not slowing it down. And that's what you're seeing there, is that it's a heat shield. And that's why it's glowing. It's glowing from the heat coming around there. And then as you kind of go through that small cloud there, you get that beautiful kind of condensation that goes around there. That's as a result of the atmosphere getting compressed, and then as it goes around, actually becoming like a lower pressure area. And when it becomes lower pressure, the saturation changes, and then you see the steam. So they're beautiful startup. Yeah. And you saw that belt. Now there's a couple of belches that are going on. So remember, we're coming down with, I think 13 engines, right? That light up.
Yes.
And
then that's what I wanted to ask you, because
13 to slow you down. It's still supersonic at that point. So it's right around supersonic, and right there it lights up, and that's at like a kilometer up. I mean, they're just waiting practically the last second here before they go ahead and do it. Yeah. My understanding is 3 seconds later, they're in the ground. That's how fast they're coming down.
Is that really 13 engines, or it doesn't look like that?
It is 13. So you're going to see the outer ring just kind of light up here in a second. So if you go maybe a frame or two, you'll see they're all light up, and then you see they light up in a pattern. So that's and part of the reason you do the pattern is like almost the same reason that when you change a tire in your car, you're supposed to tighten the nuts in a certain order. It's to make sure that you have balance throughout the whole system, and that you're not trying to light them all up at the same time. Get 1, 2, 3, and then get them all going up there in this nice little pattern. And then eventually they get all 12, and then they have to shut them down. And every time you shut down the engines, you have to purge. And so that's why you see that belch right after they say, okay, we've got enough. We're down to the velocity we need. At this point, we only need the 3 engines.
Yeah.
And the 3 engines will do the fine tuning. Now I think even those inner ones gimbal. I have a feeling eventually only the very center ones will gimbal. So they're going to a 35 engine design. This is 33. So they have 3 in the middle. Right. And then they have an outer ring of 10, which gimbals. And then they have the outer ring of that, which does not gimbal. So gimbaling costs weight, complexity, and everything else. And you'd prefer to not do that. It looks like what they're going to do is probably that inner ring will not gimbal anymore, because you can get some control through differentiation. I mean, it's like, you got 10 engines there. Come on, there's so much differential. You can use that to steer it. And then if they're going to go to, and rather than having 3 in the middle, 5 in the middle, wow, that gives you more than enough steering control to be able to come around and do whatever you want. So between differential control and between the gimbaling, they'll be able to really bring that in quite nicely. So that's probably what they'll do, which is great, because that's less hardware on 10 engines.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then what you're seeing there is that, the booster's coming down and it's trying to hit a certain spot, and it can't quite hit the spot perfectly, which is why you have that long chopsticks. So long as it's within, I'm not sure how many meters or something like that to get the pins down there, that's fine. So just get in close enough. And they also want to get the orientation just right. And they can't quite get the orientation perfect. So they're going to come in, and I think they can get within like 5 degrees of where they want to be. And now they're taking those pins, and you get this mechanism. You can see this worm screw mechanism here, which is taking the pins and pushing them in different directions to get the booster straight now. And now it'll be lined up.
That's why we see the movement, right?
Yes, that's exactly what that's for. It's like, considering all the stuff that's going on there, it's like, if you had to absolutely get that orientation perfect, I mean, it's like, man, how much? Come on, you want me to slow down? You want me to hit this XYZ location at just the right point? So they had to come down and just touch that thing, and then it's grabbed. And while it looks like the chopsticks are squeezing the booster, they are not. You do not want it doing that. So it's very, very close. That's probably why they added those 3 radars on both sides of the chopsticks that they're putting on in there, just to make sure they really know where it is. So it's this delicate balance between, the booster is trying to hit a certain spot, but it's not going to hit it precisely. And those chopsticks have to see where the booster is and compensate as much as they can for any errors that are in there, and synchronize all that.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. That's really amazing.
It is. And and so you
and this
use,
is like 35-story stall, right? This is a structure that's 35 stories tall.
I lose count how many stories there are. It's big, It's
wasn't this version of the booster slightly longer as well as the Starship?
I don't think they stretch it. I think the next block that does.
Okay.
I think this is the last one of this previous iteration because it still had the inner stage that they had to drop off. I think going forward they're not going to have that anymore. I think that's going to be integrated in, at least in the block.
You mean with the hot staging ring?
The hot staging ring will be integrated in, and that will save them a lot of dry mass because that was like an afterthought.
Yeah,
and the result is, I mean, that's 5 tons, 5 tons,
Right.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, we'll just add 5 tons. That's a lot. And so you can integrate that in. And also it seems that part of I think the rationale for dropping it off is they built the booster with some assumptions of how much the size they needed on the header tanks, or where the header tanks would be and everything else, and how much propulsive force they could create on landing. And now suddenly it's like, oh, we're going to come in with an extra 5 tons. They're like, wait a minute, we didn't spec it out for that. The header tanks are not big enough for that. The other thing is that 5 tons it may seem like compared to everything else, it's trivial, but what it does is it moves the center of gravity up a lot higher, which means now the balance point is different. So they're probably like, look, we've been optimizing it for having a very low center of gravity. Just get rid of that thing. So let's get that out of there. So because you want all the mass basically down to the bottom. So you want it to be bottom heavy, not top heavy. And if you start adding some stuff to the top, then that throws it off. So now by integrating that in, and with the common dome and everything, they can make everything much lighter.
Right. Do you think they're going to reuse this booster?
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting if they just wanted to do it.
They reused one engine, right?
I think I think in this one they may have reused an engine. The question is, when are they going to Raptor 3? Because as soon as they're going to Raptor 3, it's like almost no point to reuse these engines. So I'm wondering if they might reuse a bit more in another one. I mean, it would, if you have a high degree of confidence, yeah, sure, why not? And especially if you get some spare Starships that, you just don't mind kind of tossing around the world for whatever reason. Yeah, why not? It may be that they wait until the Block 2 to really do it. Because they may think it's too risky at this point. But I mean, I would just go ahead and either throw a dummy Starship on top just to see if it works. The only reason you wouldn't do that is because you're limited to how many flights you have per year. You want to get the most out of your flights. You just don't say, oh, let's just refurbish it.
Do you think that'll continue under the new administration?
No. I don't think this is necessarily a federal thing. I think it's also a discussion of the state of Texas and in the county and how many they want to have, because you have to remember, you do have a public beach that's there, and they're trying to do as much as they can to minimize the disruption to that beach. Now, the funny thing about the beach is I think very few people ever went to the beach there. I mean, there were just people that were locals, maybe some people and stuff, but it wasn't like it was this beach that everyone would flock to. But now that it's like on the map, everyone wants to go use the beach.
Not even the Mexicans.
Yeah. So it's it's one of those things that everyone wants. Suddenly they're worried about this beach when no one was worried about it before. And actually, there is a lot more pollution happening around that beach, but it has absolutely nothing to do with operations at Starship. That's by SpaceX. It has everything to do with the visitors that are coming down there, and kind of treating nature a lot of times the way they do, and that is just they just leave their stuff behind. And so there's actually been a lot of cleanups, volunteer cleanups by SpaceX of that, and it's basically the other the out of towners are coming in.
All right, so you see Tower 2 there. What are your thoughts? How is it coming along?
It's coming good. My understanding is that's the one that probably will be needed to catch the Starship, because I think there's enough configuration changes that they may not be able to catch Starship with Pad A. They may need Pad B to do that because of some changes to the design of the chopsticks and everything else. We've kind of talked about this before. I mean, we see that's hanging there. And it takes a while for them to detank it and then to kind of bring it down, and they have to transport it away. So you're looking at close to half a day. I mean, if they were expediting, probably half a day before they could get it out of the way. And do you want to try catching the Starship on the same pad that you're holding onto this one? Or maybe you've just taken it and dropped it on the orbital launch mount, but haven't moved it away. So if they're going to use the same tower, then they have to find a way to get that out of the way. You know, eventually that, I think, is the idea. Eventually that's the idea, is that you have enough confidence that, we're going to catch it when it's there. And as soon as we catch it, we're going to bring it over, drop it on a booster, and whoop, off you go. And maybe they're so confident the boosters even, has full propellant load, once it comes down, ready to go over, which is, usually it's like, oh, do the tanking later. So I think it would go there. And the other thing, it comes down to how long they have to wait before they can do the catch. So in order for them to catch it, it has to do an entire orbit of the Earth.
Right.
By the time it comes around 90 minutes later, the orbiter will effectively, or I guess you could say that the pads will have moved east about 1,500 miles. And so that means the orbital plane of the Starship will not be coming over unless they do something at the launch. And unless, in the launch, they do some weird dogleg to put it in a slightly different orbit that would actually allow it to come right back over to the launch site afterwards. But that usually requires expending a little bit more fuel. So if they can't make it in the first one, and it doesn't have enough cross range capability to make up 1,500 miles, that's just going to be kind of tricky. So the other thing is, I imagine it would be a 24 hours before they catch. They would attempt to do the catch, and then the orbit comes over enough that you would be able to affect that. And it could even be longer. So the only way so it's possible they could use the first tower to make both catches if within 24 hours they can get the booster out of the way. And I think they can. I think they can do that. But my understanding is they're really looking to catch it with the second one.
With the second one, right?
Yeah, and that will be exciting times. Everyone that was there, they get a treat because they saw a beautiful launch. They saw a
when do you reckon it's going to be?
And then of course there's coming. But then there's the disappointment that you find out that the rest of it failed. But if you were there and didn't care about what was happening elsewhere in orbit, you got quite a treat. Now I think people were talking about February was like the possibility after this. I'm not sure if there's going to be IFT-8 as soon as February. You never know.
I think Elon said something about it. He said there's no reason to push it beyond February.
There's no reason. Yeah. The FAA will have the final word on that probably. And we just don't know what's going to happen there. So they're going to, I assume that they're pushing ahead. Internally, they may look at it and say, oh, wait, boss, we got a problem here. We got to slow down for a couple of weeks because, maybe they do discover that there is something a bit more serious than they thought.
Everything depends on what they find out.
You can't, I mean, it's like everyone's always hopeful it's something minor, and then it may turn out it's like, oh no, this is something that requires a major redesign. So they're going to need a little bit of time to digest that, get going ahead. The disappointment of this is like this was going to be a deployment of the dummy satellites, and that maybe on 8 they would have deployed actual ones. So they have to basically redo the whole thing because they don't know how the payload may work.
Why would you put dummy satellites on when you could just,
for this reason, those satellites cost a lot of money and we just lost them. So that would have been 10 that would have been of no value. So that's one reason that you wouldn't have. The second one, this wasn't going into orbit anyways, because they're still not confident enough on the relight to be able to know that they can confidently deorbit. So to bring the real ones on board, then you need to say, we're really going into orbit. So when they're really decide they're going into orbit, they're going to bring the real one. So they're going to have to do another test. They're basically going to have to verify all this stuff. So they'll probably do another dummy payload, check that out. And they won't come back. So 8, they might actually try to go into orbit and then deorbit. And when they do the deorbit, I don't know if they're going to try to bring it back to the Gulf or, somewhere in the Indian Ocean or the Pacific or something like that.
I think, if the flight path is the same, because remember Elon had said that he'd need another ditch in the Indian Ocean before they try and bring it back.
Yes. But the reason that they're ditching in the Indian Ocean is because they're not going into orbit. They want it to naturally deorbit. And then all these dummy satellites would naturally deorbit as well. But if you get to the point that, we are going, the next one we have to to test the burn, the dummy satellites and stuff like that. Indian Ocean for sure. The one after that, they might say, we're going orbital. And not only are we going orbital, we're deploying payload on this one. So they go up there. I imagine in that sense, they're not going to like go up and come right down. They may do a couple revolutions before they decide to deorbit. And the question is, does that deorbit bring them back in the Indian Ocean, which I think would be a natural place to do it since they have the infrastructure there already to get, to do whatever they have to, as opposed to like in the middle of the Pacific or something like that. Or do they stage it that we'll bring it back to the Gulf of Mexico?
So that's what I was about to ask you, because they could very well do that. And they always have the opportunity. I mean, if they're going to try and catch it, they always could ditch in the Gulf.
Yeah. So I don't know that they would be, say, oh, we're going to attempt to catch it. But for sure, I mean, just bring it back because it's a lot easier for your engineers to look at it, to bring it in, to inspect it, everything else. It seems like, from a logistics standpoint, it'd be a lot better. There's a lot of discussion on whether they're even ready to do the catch because they haven't quite figured out where the catch pins are going to be and how the tiling system, the protection, all that's going to work. So there's still like tons of unknowns on how everything's going to work before they can do the catch, and whether they would be ready by IFT-9. I think that's a stretch. I'm thinking 9, they might go orbital and deploy something, and then they could possibly by 10 attempt to catch that. Now, when 10 is,
you may just have it in. You may just see that it's called the Gulf of America by then.
Yeah, exactly. It could be. So we'll see. Every 2 months, maybe you're seeing a launch. Maybe higher cadence. Maybe they start getting down to 6. Yeah, I mean, right now we're at a cadence close to every 2 months.
That's conservative.
I mean, it could be faster than that. So if you're looking at when IFT-10 is going to happen, it's probably sometime in the summer. It's possible, things, it could accelerate that if they're making great progress and they're just, they've got a surplus of these boosters that are coming out. And so long as they don't have any issues with road closures and stuff like that, and weather is favorable, they could do it. So I'm pretty sure sometime this year, they're going to attempt to catch the Starship. And that's going to be the historic one that everyone's going to want to go and see because it'll be a double treat. But you can't come in and out for the day. You're going to probably have to stay a day or two for you to see the catch.